everybody. Welcome to Travel.Write.Money. Today we're going to talk about El Salvador. We're going to talk about Bitcoin and the dollar and why they would take the step that they did and what the implications are in the future. So before we get into that, let's kind of talk about we'll lay things out first before we get to that point. So El Salvador gets billions of dollars a year in remittances from people who work in the United States or perhaps other countries and send money back home. They'll send dollars typically through Western Union or MoneyGram to their families back home, and they pay fees to transfer that money from wherever they're living to where their family is back in El Salvador, right? So we're looking at billions of dollars coming into the country from abroad. And they also have their own local currency, the I forget what it's called, the colon, which is named after Christopher Columbus, because in Spanish Columbus somehow is colon. So we're looking at the colon being used. What the hell? My phone died. Excuse me, sorry. And at the same time, we're going to have people paying in Bitcoin. So I did notice in the news that President clarified that that Bitcoin is not going to replace the dollar as a legal tender in the country. It's going to be Bitcoin, the dollar, and the colon. I think they still use it. I don't know for sure, but from what I've read so far, that's still in use in some places, but the dollar is also usable. And now they're just adding a third legal tender, which is Bitcoin. Okay. So in the legislation, it said that one of the things that is exempted is if it's not technically possible to accept Bitcoin, that a business is not obligated to take Bitcoin as payment, right? Which is, fair. It's usable because it doesn't force local businesses to go out and purchase new technology that, maybe they weren't set up to take Visa and MasterCard either, right? So why would they have to go invest in taking Bitcoin? So it exempts a lot of businesses that are cash only, dollar only, or colon only, whatever they choose to use, but it's basically cash only. So then we're looking at the other thing is that the problem is with Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is very volatile. So I saw in an article recently that the government is going to set up I thought it was like $100 million fund, but it might be more or less, who knows, where anybody who needs to convert their Bitcoin into fiat to circumvent the problem of the volatility of Bitcoin, they'll be able to go to that fund and cash out their Bitcoin and get cash for whatever it is that they have, which is great. So what I'm seeing from my point of view is that by having $100,000 or $100 million available, maybe it was 10, I don't know, it might have been $10 million, however many millions, by having that many millions of dollars available to convert Bitcoin into fiat, what the government is effectively doing at that point is not that much different from what MicroStrategy is doing, which is taking dollars in the form of a bond and then buying Bitcoin, right? What's the difference? So the government is taking fiat money, which is probably dollars because they have a lot of those, right? And then they're using those dollars to buy Bitcoin because merchants and perhaps other people who may have Bitcoin for whatever reason may not want to deal with the volatility of Bitcoin, so they're willing to convert it over to fiat money, right? So doesn't that convert, or doesn't that transfer Bitcoin over to the government, where then they can take that money and put it in their treasury? See, this is what's brilliant about all this, is that they've set up a way for the government to collect and put fiat into their treasury without them going outright and buying it from the exchanges, because it's the people themselves in their everyday, day-to-day transactions who are selling it to the government, right? I mean, it's like a genius move in that case. So now it may be $10 million that they have in the fund, or $100 million, or however much they have. But later on is when they start stacking it up, and Bitcoin starts going up, 10, 20% a day, and hits the all-time highs and all that. The government will be sitting high, sitting pretty with all of this Bitcoin in their treasury. And so suddenly, all of a sudden, of course, that's a thing. The IMF is just going to sit there staring at what they could have had, because they've been a bit prissy about El Salvador taking Bitcoin, in the whole approach of lending them money, because IMF obviously wants the El Salvador to be in debt to them, so that way they can control El Salvador. But if they don't take the money, if they don't borrow the money, they have no leverage. They can't do anything to El Salvador. They can't, call the shots. They can't do anything. They're stuck. So that was a thought that I had in what they have done. So as soon as other countries catch on, it's going to be game over for the IMF, I think. I mean, think about it. Instead of buying, so let's say, for example, you buy Bitcoin off of the exchange. Let's say you have to go to Coinbase or to Binance or whatever other exchange somewhere out there in the world, right? As a government, and the United States says, you know what, you guys are prohibited from selling Bitcoin to El Salvador, to the government, right? Because the U.S. can pull strings for the SWIFT network and say, your banks over there, you're prohibited from doing any business with El Salvador. You can't, you can't loan them money. You can't hold money for them, and any money they put in your bank is forfeit. So the U.S. can do that because the U.S. has the reserve currency. But with Bitcoin, I mean, perhaps let's say that the U.S. says, you know what, we are going to go tell Binance that they're not allowed to do business with El Salvador, or we're going to go tell Coinbase or whoever that they're off limits. And since these exchanges would still have, since they're legit and they don't want to cross governments, they may say, well, yeah, okay, we won't do it. But what's to stop, Juan Silva up in Washington, D.C., working at a hotel from sending a remittance in Bitcoin over to, Juanita Silva back in El Salvador, with the kids, money in Bitcoin. And then if the government's going to say, well, you know what, we'll take your Bitcoin in exchange for cash, suddenly you've got an unstoppable flow of cash, of Bitcoin coming in, that you can just pump into your treasury and, use that as collateral for loans against people who, or even whoever who just wants to loan money against Bitcoin. So that's something that came into mind, and I'm excited to see, and I want to see this play itself out. So that's what I wanted to leave you with today. All right, thanks for listening to Travel Right Money. We'll talk to you again soon.